Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and it's time for this week's discussion about the offense in that game against the Lions. We probably are going to be a little happier talking about this side of the ball, but it's still a painful loss, and this is soon after the game. Here to talk about it with me is Jim ZipCode. Jim, how you doing?
Great, Ken, but I may have joined the wrong thing. Is this a podcast? I called up my therapist for a helpline consultation. I may have got the wrong number.
Yeah. All right. So the really sensitive, empathic guy on the other end of the line is me. You're in luck.
Yay.
So a disastrous game for health for the Ravens. The loss is acceptable. You know, not something that we're happy about, but you're going to occasionally lose a game, even in prime time, even at home, even against the NFC, even with Lamar Jackson. You're going to occasionally lose a game like that. But the health problems coming out of this game just look titanic. And we're recording this on Wednesday night. So they practiced on Wednesday. It's a short week. Travis Jones and Broderick Washington were DNPs today. Matabike still a DNP and has already been ruled out for Sunday's game. The Ravens, the concern level seems to be very high. I would call the mood somber in terms of how the thing is being described. So, I mean, at this point, I really hope there's nothing serious chronic problem that cannot be addressed here. But we obviously, like everybody else, will have to wait and see on that. But the Ravens did, I think it's fair to say, fail a litmus test against a top NFC team.
No, I would put it exactly that way. And it looked to me like on both fronts, offense and defense, the other team was just quicker and stronger kind of across the board than the Ravens were.
Yeah, we got badly out-physicaled. In a lot of ways reminds me of the Eagles game from last year in terms of a game where they got beat very soundly. And in both games, it's strange, but Lamar backdoored it into a one-score game with a late touchdown. And in the Eagles games, with 3 seconds left, actually. In this game, there was a little more time. They had a legitimate chance, to kick and try and recover the onside kick and potentially score again. That would have been real exciting if that would have happened. Ravens continue to be unable to sustain drives. A lot of high variance play on offense. They're doing actually a pretty good job of avoiding penalties on offense, but they got 7 sacks. They sacked 7 times in this game, and some of those ended up stalling drives. Others did not, but still were costly in terms of time or yardage. And honestly, the high variance of play, a lot of it is coming from the running game at this point. It seems to be a complete feast or famine situation. Henry's had 3 fumbles in 3 games, but they've also had some negative runs that have got him in trouble. And they've had some very long runs from Henry, which have helped them score, but score very quickly, which has taxed their defense to an additional degree. Not saying they don't want to score. I'm just saying there's kind of how quickly you score kind of creates almost a tax on the scoring that you do. So your touchdown, instead of being worth 7 points, is only worth, let's say, 6.7 because you scored it so quickly. And the likelihood of your opponent scoring on the next drive might be a little higher.
There's an old anecdote about the Dan Fouts Chargers from the early to mid 80s, where they scored, 28 points in the fourth quarter, and their star defensive player, whoever that was, confronted Fouts during the kickoff to Dan Fouts. He said, "Listen, 28 points, I love it, but could you slow down a little bit?"
Yeah. Well, the Oilers team that blew the 35-3 lead against the Buffalo Bills. That was a run and shoot offense. And it's, one of the things about the run and shoot offense is you just don't have a good way to control the clock when you need to control the clock. And unfortunately, the Lions really dared the Ravens to throw the ball in this game. I thought they're packed in very tight around the line of scrimmage. And, there's nothing, you can't bring more people inside the formation. If the other team is daring you to throw the football and you have Lamar Jackson, you got to go ahead and throw the football.
Yeah.
And there'd be teams that would not have any answer for that. If you had a really poor quarterback, you'd be in a lot more trouble in that situation, and they'd be much more likely to create problems for you. But it was the only answer in this case, and it was an outstanding night, I thought, for Lamar, despite the 7 sacks. He did an awful lot of things personally to make things right. They put the ball in harm's way a couple times. Almost got intercepted by Branch. On the long throw down the kind of the right numbers, right.
Recovered a fumble too.
Yeah, he recovered his own fumble, so that was good. Then he threw for well over his expected yards, as we'll talk about. But I thought overall an outstanding game for Lamar, who is not going to make it through the season if he has to play many more games like that one yesterday or Monday night.
Is it really that different from the, so I was about to say something exceptionally stupid. I was about to say, is it really that different from how much of a workload Lamar had to carry during some of the Greg Roman years? And I was formulating that question, having forgotten that at least 2 of those seasons, Lamar didn't finish with a season-ending injury. So I withdraw the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate question anyway, because I think that a lot of the sacks Lamar takes normally are as he's decided to try and make a run out of the play. And he had an S0, for example, in this game. Okay, I think it was the spy who ended up getting him on the S0.
I'm sorry, what's an S0?
A sack for no loss.
Okay, yeah.
As opposed to an S-7 would be a sack for loss.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it'd be clearer if I said it that way, obviously. But you know, a lot of run plays that Lamar has, you know, he decides to run, and sometimes it works out for a small loss, and those sacks don't really cost you very much. It's just really a run for -1 or a run for -2. But if he, you know, the flip side of that is not counted in sacks are a whole bunch of scrambles for big yardage that, you know, are what you get as the benefit from Lamar Jackson. He's had some fantastic years in the past, most notably in 2019, running for tons of yards as a scrambler.
We did a podcast on that, Forced Not to Pass, and he had something like over 4 yards per play on those situations.
5.1, I believe, in 2019. So
incredible.
That's just ridiculous. I mean, yeah, that's the best running back in the league kind of level, and it has his sacks rolled into that number.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I thought there were several plays where Lamar sifted through the first wave of pass rushers and then had a decision point, like, do I hang in to throw? Do I try to run? And he hung in for an extra second or so to try to throw. I feel like several of those sacks could have been 3 to 6 yard gains, you know, positive plays that could have done more to keep the chains moving.
Okay, so there's a couple things about that. First of all, I don't doubt that you're right, and you can remember a play or two where that was correct, and he might have taken a sack, and it might have been a gain. They spied him very effectively. They made very effective use of that strategy, which is why I think the doors were closed. And it's why a lot of people are saying, well, why isn't Lamar running? Is he hurt?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong? You know, kind of thing. First of all, the run on the read option is the defense's choice on you know, whether Jackson is going to keep the ball or the running back is going to keep the ball. Lamar will read it most of the time correctly, and then if he sees the edge crashing down, he's going to run it himself, take it himself. He's going to try and make yardage out of it. That's just the way that works. So the defense actually makes a choice. It's kind of like the defense gets to put in their personnel second, or the home team in hockey gets to make the second
last
line
substitution.
Change.
Yeah.
So that, and then the other part is, if you play a spy, you're already basically exchanging some coverage value for not having Lamar hurt you with his legs as much as he does. So I think a lot of that is probably overblown. The notion that he's not, I mean, he's moving around behind the line of scrimmage very well. He's doing an outstanding job of avoiding pressure there. You know, it seems silly to say it after a 7-sack game, but he really is moving quite well and still making throws from there. We saw he made the 37-yard throw to Hill, which was really a remarkable triple missed tackle by the Lions. But he you know, he made some good plays. The pass to Bateman when he rolled left is not a throw that many quarterbacks at all in the National Football League can make.
Right.
Are you concerned about Derrick Henry at this point with 3 fumbles in 3 games? In terms of what it really means to Derrick Henry for the rest of this season, or even for the rest of his career?
So my short answer is I don't know. My longer answer is that I think in a great athlete, particularly like a great wide receiver, a great running back, I think age manifests itself in different ways. And, you know, I don't know if Henry has to do certain things behind the line of scrimmage to get himself up to steam, which result in there's that much less concentration available to his off arm or something. You know, I just don't know. I think that when you fumble in the fourth quarter of 3 consecutive games, you know, I don't care who you are, I'm concerned. I would be less concerned about Derrick Henry if he were 27 or 28. Yeah, absolutely, I'm concerned.
Okay. His body of work that he's got is a lot different from a 27 or 28-year-old back, or a 25-year-old back, let's say. I'd be more concerned about a younger back who is showing this proclivity, even for the first time in, say, his 3rd or 4th season. You're more concerned about the older back, manifestation of age.
I So a 28-year-old back is not a young back. To me,
No,
a young
you're right. It's
back is
not.
like a 23, 24, 25-year-old back. So yeah, I would be concerned about, like, if this were J.K. Dobbins in his second or third year, I would absolutely be concerned.
Okay.
If it, do you remember when Justin Tucker was missing kicks last year?
Mhm.
And there was a lot of discussion, particularly from the old Vikings punter Chris Kluwe, about mechanics and how, with his hip rotation, and now that he's older, his leg is coming through the strike zone like a microsecond later than it used to. So now there's like an extra factor of rotation. He's a little more turned when the kick comes through. When you're talking about a mechanical issue and Justin Tucker, there's certainly few people in the history of the sport that I would trust more to rectify a mechanical issue.
Mhm.
So by that theory, I would trust Derrick Henry more to rectify this if there were a mechanical issue. But he's old, and decline is not linear, and it happens weirdly. So I don't know, if it were merely mental and mechanical, I would trust him to adjust to that. If it's a symptom of his losing something, and he's shifting his concentration from his legs to his arms or back and forth or whatever, I just don't know what to think, Ken. I want to trust him, but I distrust every 31-year-old running back.
Okay. Well, that I think is not unreasonable, frankly. Consecutive games for the offense with under 100 yards rushing. I don't have a problem with that at all. Obviously, they were forced into a position where the Lions basically said, "You have to pass to beat us,"
Mm-hmm.
and I think they'll get that. They'll get that statement effectively made by the personnel they face against other teams. Lions played a lot of base defense versus 11 personnel in this game. They didn't respect what the Ravens put out there at all. With the Andrews flex, they're keeping their linebackers on the field to cover him. Andrews had a big game, obviously,
Right.
so that at least was really nice coming out of this. But it does not really bother me in the same way that they ran for 85 yards in this game, than the potential for Henry's fumbles being a longer term thing. So both
Right.
are pretty low risk items, but I'd say the 85 yards bothers me a little bit less.
So this is consecutive opponents, right? And so
Yeah,
last week the Brownies held the Ravens to, what is it, 45 yards rushing?
45 yards. Yeah.
So the low of the Lamar era, when he's played.
Mhm.
But I thought that schematically, I thought that the play callers did a tremendous job of adjusting and using their but I mean the opposing defense's overreaction to Derrick Henry, productively in terms of play action, and just lighting him in the passing game. Um, this, to me, this game was different in the sense that it didn't seem like the Ravens had an effective counter. Like, were the Lions committing a lot of bodies to the line of scrimmage, or were they just that good with their front?
Now they were packed in, is
Mm-hmm.
what I'd say, and they're packed in and heavier personnel naturally on a down by down basis
Right.
because they often had a linebacker instead of a slot corner on the field. So um, yes, I'd say they were, particularly on the plays where Henry was in, they were very packed in and very much, setting up to prevent the run. And the Ravens, the only reasonable response to that is to say, okay, well, if daring us to pass, we'll take you up on it, and go and hit some passes. And they did. It was a good game for Lamar in terms of exceeding expectation there, and got to take what the defense gives you.
I agree with that. It would be nice if is it time for a weekly Keaton Mitchell lament?
Whenever you like, I'd
It
tell
would
you
be
that.
nice to be in 1-1 personnel with Keaton Mitchell on the field, a lot of speed on the field, and make defenses kind of adjust to that. Like, if you want to go big, okay, we'll go fast.
All right, so we got a question in the mailbag we'll go to right now. It's from Rick Henry and says, with Mitchell being inactive, I am finding Harb's excuse to be thin. Hill is not part of the run game. On 74 snaps, he's carried the ball 5 times. Hill on the field indicates pass. Thoughts? I think you've got a chicken egg relationship there. I would say a passing down indicates Hill on the field.
I agree with that.
Is how
Yep.
I would say it. So teams run because they win; they don't win because they run, kind of thing.
Right.
But I would say that the Hill is going to be on the field in most passing downs, and that's why you get that. I think the value of Mitchell, though, to get back to your kind of thesis here, which was, you'd like to see more Mitchell in 11 personnel. That could happen, by the way, if Henry is ineffective, period. Because
Right.
I think Mitchell is clearly the best back the Ravens have left that could be a significant workload back if you wanted to have him in the backfield. So if something were to happen to Henry, or if Henry were just not be effective for, say, 3 more games, I don't think it would take a lot. Then I think we'd see Mitchell, and we'd see him with a pretty significant workload. And we'd still see some of Henry, but it would be a shared responsibility. It might be a by committee thing, and that's too depressing even to think about, given the contract they just gave him. That might be, it's something that we would be relatively close to. But the thing I'd say about Mitchell is I think he'd be more effective right now putting him in pony situations where he's the second back and you gain an element of misdirection. So you have the unbelievable hammer of Henry there. You have the misdirection from Mitchell, which has to be dealt with. And then you have the possibility of Lamar Jackson keeping the ball. And that's the triple whammy that I think will give defenses the most trouble.
Service Academy triple option, baby. Let's run it.
There you go.
Air Force Academy. Let's just put that out there. I think Todd Monken's brother or uncle or something is the coach there.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, he's come from a coaching family.
Well, I mean, it's not like the Ravens haven't exactly had this in their DNA for a long time, but they've been using wide receivers. It's been Wallace in motion sometimes. And Wallace is a good one to have in motion because he's a blocker, but he isn't always the great one to have in motion if you're threatening a jet sweep. And so they've often used Flowers in that role. And when they do, they hand it to him. Sometimes the other team is keyed into it a little bit better. And, using horizontals that speed horizontally isn't always seem to be the best use of Flowers, who has a tremendous impact on safeties if you can get him down the field.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I feel like Flowers is sometimes miscast because I feel like the Ravens want to use him as a gadget back, and really he's you want to think of him as like Steve Smith light, like he's a downfield player really.
Yeah, I mean he's a swan, not a duckling, that's for sure. I'd like to see him down the field. I'd like to see he's deadly on crossing routes. There's no one in the NFL who can cover him right now because there's no one in the NFL who can cut with him, frankly. And that's he's an unfair cheat code in terms of the game, which is really surprising that he had such a quiet game in this one. So
so did you notice? I didn't look at all 22 for this game. Did you notice any concerted effort? Like I assume that the Lions blanketed him, double covered him and whatever, and that was the source of, for example, Bateman's excellent game. Did you see anything like that?
I didn't specifically look for that. So when you go through the all 22 for the first time on the offense, generally what I'm trying to figure out is what coverage are they in, and are they playing too deep, are they playing a single guy in the post and whatnot. They did a lot of little things with rotation to bring guys down. They also had Branch down the field on some plays. So one of the big plays, I think, was the throw to Bateman that almost got intercepted. It was a really strong bracket they had back there, but Branch was underneath on the play. Trying to make that. You remember it? 32. No. Okay. Down the right seam. I think it was Bateman. I may be wrong. Maybe it was me. No, it might have been Kolar. So look for a pass to Kolar that's pass deep right.
I'm actually looking for your offensive line scoring article.
Oh, okay. Sure. Anyway, we'll continue on, but I've kind of forgot where I was. So I'm just going to move on here. Per play offensive efficiency for the Ravens is still high from this game. They ran the ball okay, not up to the Ravens standard, largely because of how the Lions played it, but they certainly passed up to the Ravens standard. And, they didn't turn the ball over, which was a little bit of luck, but they did also throw for 50 yards more than expectation, which was positive. They tried that ridiculous pass play with Henry. That I am not completely averse to passes of that type, but they just didn't seem to be in a way that they were easily protecting even a rollout for a running back there, which is usually a little bit easier to buy a little more time for. And then the other problem was they only had one guy in the pattern, and Henry decided to throw that ball anyway. I felt like that was if ever there was a no, that's Ed Reed moment,
yes,
kind of from the 2004 game that applied to the Ravens, that was it right there.
Yeah,
Wallace, amazing play.
What are you doing throwing that ball?
Yeah.
And as I recall, Lamar was to the left side of the formation. I mean, if he was going to throw it to anyone,
Yeah.
which he should not have, I don't know that I want a running back attempting a horizontal across the field pass in any situation. But
He was
Lamar
wide
was
open.
all
Yeah.
alone, right? Yeah.
I think it was maybe Hutchinson who ran after him, from the backside of the play. It might have been a linebacker. I could be wrong about that, but somebody ran after him. They might have been able to stop the touchdown, but it would have been off. It would have been one man to beat situation for Lamar, which is usually a good thing.
Usually a great thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've wanted them to try the Derrick Henry pop pass many times last season. I would have liked to have been more effective when they finally busted out.
What else we got going on? We talked about.
I should look up Derrick Henry's career passes because I always think of them going to the quarterback like Ryan Tannehill. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I thought he threw one against the Ravens in the playoffs that might have been to a tight end.
I thought the one in 2019 went to Tannehill, I think.
Really? It did?
I think.
Okay.
Well, now you're making me doubt myself.
You can take a look when we're going here. We talked a little bit about the Lions' effective use of the spy. This is another game where the Ravens lost snap count very decisively, 66-54 in this game. Now, this is enormous. In 3 games, they've run 59 fewer plays than their opponents.
20 per game.
Yeah.
And that's not their DNA. That's not how they play football.
No, not at all. But, the lack of Ricard, the lack of, healthy tight ends, including Likely, who can also give you some blocking, and the lack of really better offensive line play than they've had has made it very difficult. They've played some tough lines. Cleveland and Detroit are both, very solid defensive fronts that are effective stopping the run, but they just have not had the offensive consistency necessary to have longer drives.
You were right. The touchdown pass from Derrick Henry in the 2019 playoff game was to Corey Davis, not to Tannehill.
There you go. Okay, so wide receiver, but yeah.
Yeah.
3.25 points per drive is a fantastic number. It'd be, I think, the second highest total in the National Football League histories, but behind the 2007, I believe it's the 2007, not the 2011 Patriots, but it's one of those 2 Patriots teams that was outrageous in terms of their scoring. But they can't maintain that. They're not going to be able to maintain that. Even playing some weaker teams with the variance of result being what it is, they're going to need to completely improve that variance. And it's one of the only things I think that can help save the defense at this point is them really reducing snap count for the defense, which was the exact secret formula for the 2019 Ravens.
Right. Yeah, and the 2018 Ravens, although that started with a good defense, but when Lamar started playing, they started, going on these long drives, keeping opponents on the sidelines.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely.
So do they have the off? So if you want to limit the opposition snap count, to me, you're thinking running game. And you're thinking that you have a back who's a workhorse back who does not fumble the ball, and you have effective offensive line play that can really open holes and block the other team. Do the Ravens have any of that?
They have hopefully a fullback. They'll get back at some point.
Okay.
They have, Likely has been a blocking asset for them. I don't think that Zaire Mitchell-Payton has been particularly good. A very, very costly false start for him. One of the most costly false starts of the entire season to do so at the 1 yard line. Didn't actually cost them the game there. They still won handily, but definitely cost them points on that drive. I think they've got enough assets that things could go back to normal. We'll get into the offensive line play in the second part. There were some encouraging signs actually from even a game like this. I did want to talk about one thing that I'm seeing floating around the internet though. And I'm sure you've probably seen as well that PFF is claiming there were 31 pressures okay, PFF's not making any particular claim. They have a totals column for their pressures and sacks and quarterback hits. The sum of all 3 of those is 31 for this game. And by the way, that might change because they make changes after the fact and they recategorize things and do it. That's
they
fine.
Review and reclaim. Yeah, sure.
And it might, I don't know if they ever have a point where they say, okay, that's final. We can't make a change on this. Kind of like the National Football League, I believe, has a final point where they won't make a change to statistics and teams are allowed to turn their stuff in. So anyway, and by the way, along those lines, Daniel Falele apparently has a penalty this year. And now I have to go back and figure out where that was because he did not have one in the original statistics. So the NFL tagged him with one since.
In this game, in the Lions game? Oh,
I think it's
in a
in one of the first two games because I don't remember it being in the Lions game. I don't
Okay.
remember them having a false start at all. So I've scored the offensive line for all three games. Daniel Faalele didn't have a penalty. So somewhere along the line, the NFL said, yeah, that's Daniel Faalele's penalty because they're actually on their list, not just PFF's list, but it's on their list of penalties. So they made.
So do you think that they took it away from another player?
Yes, probably.
Okay. So it could be, you could find the discrepancy that way.
That's right. So I could find it easily, I'm sure. If I look back at the game book will be updated to reflect it now. But the thing with the PFF pressure totals, let's get back to that and stay on point, is that they show 31 pressures as the sum of all pressures for the allowed by the blocking of the Ravens.
And that includes sacks, right?
Well, it includes sacks, includes quarterback hits.
Okay.
They've got one quarterback hit in there. And another thing that I didn't catch because there were no quarterback hits in the game book. They had sacks, but they didn't have any quarterback hits that weren't sacks in the game book originally. So a change might have been made there too. I'll get to the point here because this is what I'm really trying to get to, is that doesn't mean that on 31 of the Ravens' 35 passing attempts, Lamar was under pressure. What it means is they're giving out integer pressures, which they're comfortable giving out one to each of two players. And in the total of 35 passes, they were pressured 19 times.
Okay.
And there's a whole bunch of double counting that's occurred otherwise. And the problem is people go to those stats and they treat them like something they're not. They quote them in a way and they say, often the times that passes piss me off when they'll say,
Lamar was pressured on 31 of his 35 passes.
Well, see, PFF would never say that because they know that's wrong. But other people who quote the PFF stats will say exactly that.
Yeah,
and they'll get it wrong. And so that's a place where it gets ridiculous. The other thing is the next gen missed tackle total. So they've got the Ravens for 20 missed tackles in this game. Now, let me just say this: I have used the PFF tackle totals in the past because I think they're the most draconian that I have found. And I think it's good to have a system that is tough on the players and creates the highest level of missed tackles, because I think it gives you the most differentiation between men and boys. Even though we all know that there's good missed tackles and bad missed tackles, when you spin a guy 360 degrees in the backfield or you retrack a running back, that could be a good missed tackle. But the difference between 9 and 20, 9 for PFF, a highly draconian system, and 20 for next gen, I am at a loss for words in terms of how that can even be true.
When you say PFFs is a draconian system, you mean it's very rough on the defenders, right? It charges
very,
them.
very tough on the defender.
Okay, so it charges them for missed tackle when other sources might not.
Yeah, and it's often right around the ankles, and they've gotten more tough in recent years. They didn't used to be as tough as they were. And in fact, that's caused some kind of anomalies in their statistics, because I think they're looking back on a 3-year average, and there was one of the years recently, like literally every defensive lineman in the league, other than the top 3 or 4, was a below average tackler, like a grade under 60. And that just hasn't been normalized properly to the current thing. And what it's reflective of is they made their system tougher, and then they're comparing them to players from 2 and 3 years ago where the system was easier, and everybody looks like crap, basically. In terms of
what's supposed to happen is everybody has an above average income, not a below average missed tackle rate.
Yeah, it doesn't work either for that.
Well, so that's interesting. So so the draconian source has 9 missed tackles, and the more permissive source has 20 missed tackles.
No, the unknown source has 20.
Okay.
So next gen, I don't know how they do it, and they're not next gen. I believe their time to throw metrics are on the money, because they've got the sensor on the ball,
the sensors in the shoulder pad. Yeah.
And so they've got the sensors for all of that. And I think they probably do a better job of that than PFF. PFF typically has a higher time to throw statistic, which is telling me they're using some other method. And Gordon McGuinness was telling me about it once, that they use some timing alongside the video method. I use the click system, which is very accurate, but I'm not timing every throw either. But I'll say that the next gen came in at 3.0 in this game for Lamar. And I think that PFF was at 330 or 338 or something. It was a really high number. Big difference. All right. So anyway, you can do this a lot of ways, and we'll leave that be. Let's talk about the return of Isaiah Likely, because if there's any like little bit of hope for the offense to get more
Diverse?
Yeah, more
No,
diverse, more efficient, more being able to sustain
more
drives.
consistent and
Yeah.
sustaining drives. Okay, yeah.
Do you think he's a reasonable answer?
I think a perfectly healthy, 100% productive Isaiah Likely absolutely is that kind of an answer. And I think first game back from injury, Isaiah Likely is unlikely. It's not a great bet to be that answer.
Gotcha. Okay. Always get tripped up with that, don't you, in terms of the word?
Yeah.
I think he will be a big improvement in terms of both blocking and receiving. Some of the things they do to make a block in level 2 or 3, Likely's very good at, and good at keeping his feet and whatnot. So it'll be nice to have him back on the field at a minimum for that. And I think he does a lot of other things for you as well.
Have you heard anything about Ricard's return to play?
Nope. Hasn't practiced since August 14th. So
That's
it's
great.
been, what, 6 weeks or so, almost 6 weeks now. So it could be I think they've kicked the can down the road, hoping it would work out, but this is week 4 now, and they maybe have to make a decision. They've got a bye week that basically gives them a free week of IR time,
Right.
if you want to think of it that way. And what I mean by that, folks who are in the listening audience, I can tell Jim knows exactly what I'm talking about. But if they put him on IR before this game, then he's only got to miss weeks 4 through 7, which includes that bye week in week 7. But if they waited until, say, before week 8 to do it, then they'd have 4 games they'd lose instead of 3. All right. Ready to move on to Lamar Jackson a little bit?
Say that again, please.
Ready to move on to Lamar a little bit?
Absolutely.
All right. Detroit, I think, really rushed numbers at Lamar in this game. They averaged 4.8 rushers per play, which is extraordinarily high. So I think of them as being a very talented 4-man pass rush that has Muhammad on one side and Hutchinson on the other. And they did some of that. They were very successful with it, by the way, with 3 rushers, 1 play, -4 yards, 1 sack. Can't do any better than that. With four rushing, they had 16 plays, 74 yards, 4.6 yards per play, and 4 sacks. So that's 5 sacks on 17 plays with 3 or 4 rushing the quarterback. Incredible. And then when they started rush 5, 6, or 7, Lamar really picked them apart. So when they rushed 5, 10 plays, 93 yards. It did include 1 sack, but 9.3 yards per play. And then with 6 plays for 56 yards, 9.3 also with 1 sack. And with 7+, there are 2 of those plays, 1-7 and 1-8, where they had 2 plays for 25 yards, 12.5 yards per play. So Lamar did a lot better when they were rushing more at him. And he probably did a good job of getting rid of the ball quickly in some of those situations, but also did a good job of moving around and avoiding pressure.
That's so counterintuitive. The more pass rushers, the higher the yards per play. Did you notice whether any of the plays with 4 and I guess 3 pass rushers were deceptive pressures, like, people like faking blitz, dropping out, and they only wound up with 4 rushing?
That's a really good question. And I have to figure out if I can do that on my sheet here. I don't keep the blitzes separately, but I do keep sim pressures. So I'll just say 1. There were blitzes, I can tell you that. But I only see maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I did some in the second half. They had 4 simulated pressures, including 2 consecutive sacks on the first drive of the fourth quarter. And then they had, that simulated pressure as a pass left for 4. And then the last simulated pressure was a ball out quick incomplete with a PD by Branch. So a pretty impressive, honestly, set of simulated pressures they threw at the Ravens.
When they do a sim pressure, does that wind up being a 4-man rush?
Okay. Did it wind up being a 4-man rush in each of these cases? I mean, it could be any number because it's just the number of people who dropped from the line of scrimmage. I guess it can't be over 9 in theory, but I don't count the ones that are 1. It says 1 4-man rush, a 3-man rush. That was a sack, a 4-man rush, and another 4-man rush. So yes, all 3s and 4s.
What's interesting is as I look over the stats for this game, right? I look over your the yards per play with 5, 6, and 7+ rushers. I look over the points per possession. Was it like 3.3 or something like that? They scored 30 points on the game. Despite the 7 sacks, like this looks like a good game by the offense against an extremely strong defense. Watching it, I didn't have that feeling that that the Ravens were performing all that effectively against this defense. And some of that is what you talked to about stringing drives together. And, some of the big plays seemed kind of lucky. Like sort of shoestring big plays that, weren't necessarily things that were repeatable and that you could depend on.
I think I
I
agree
don't
with
know.
that.
Yeah, I was wondering, okay, I mean, do you, I'm not saying it was enough, right? Because clearly it wasn't enough, but it does seem like a decent day at the office for the Ravens offense.
Right. So, I mean, there's certainly things I could pick out of this that I think were pretty good. I think Lamar did a pretty good job under the circumstances. I can
Yep.
start with that. I got a horrible PFF grade in this game, by the way, because they really blame him for taking some of these sacks, is where a lot of that's coming from. But the other part of it is that he put a couple of balls in jeopardy during the game.
Yeah,
So
that's
he had
true.
two turnover worthy plays that didn't come to fruition. But he got a lot of players from the offense involved. We saw Walker on another 7 route look really good.
10 yards per attempt.
Yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with that.
3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Okay, so they're counting the turnover worthy plays as potentially turnovers,
and you really need to take his sacks in there. So Lamar threw the ball 27 times in this game. He was sacked 7 times, and I think it was for 233. So it's 233 over 34 is the number that I consider to be kind of the true number. It's a little bit less than seven yards per attempt, which is not up to the normal Lamar standards. But he because the opportunity set was so lousy in this game, which is what I want to talk about next, he was still pretty terrific.
Well, also that figure that you just quoted is net yards per attempt, and a figure just under 7 is actually pretty good for an average.
I would say it's not particularly good for Lamar Jackson to throw.
Not for Lamar Jackson, agreed.
Yeah. I mean, Lamar Jackson last year was probably around 9. He certainly was over 8.
Yep. He led the league in that stat.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at ATS, ball out quick, and pressure here really quickly. Mentioned already earlier, there are 19 pressures. And by the way, I don't want to minimize the pressure Jackson was under. And by the way, this includes 1 Henry pass also, which was pressure. So the 54% pressure rate is completely unacceptable. The Ravens had a rate in just prairie dogged over 50% a couple of times last year. And those were great pressure games where they just obliterated their opponents. They had 8 ample time space opportunities, which is 23%. That's a little low. And they had 8 ball out quicks, which is also 23%, obviously, and is probably somewhat low. Normally, you might expect to get about a third in each category, maybe slightly higher in ball out quick and about even in the pressure on ATS. But anytime you get beat 19-8 in pressure to ATS, that's really bad. And it was 9-3 in the first game. The Browns game is actually a little more even. I think it might have been 11-10 in terms of pressure versus ATS. But they've given up more pressures than they've had ample time and space in every game this season. And a good amount of that is on the offensive line, but I really thought in this game, not at all on the offensive line. The offensive line did not bear the entire blame for it.
You don't mean not at all. You mean not all. So some of it
not all, but they do not.
So what were some of the other factors?
The use of a spy was very effective. So that kept Lamar in the backfield for longer. The 4-man rush was kind of effective, moving him around and forcing him to throw early, which means you're throwing into a 7-man coverage and you probably have a little bit less opportunity for success. A lot of it just is the sack yardage, because if you take 288 over 27, you have a very Lamar-esque game.
Right.
And even if he takes 1 sack for 8 yards in there, you're still at 10 yards a throw. And that'd be a perfectly normal Lamar game. It's the 6 extra sacks that were kind of the problem. And that's on a bunch of different people. The extra rushers often were free and they didn't have anybody blocking them. The eligible receivers didn't do a particularly good job in this game, so they had some problems with blocking. The offensive line themselves had some breakdowns, but I charged them actually to blow the lead for the second show a little bit with 2 2/3 of the 7 sacks.
That's not a
so
lot.
It's not all them. Normally, I would say that number's maybe about half goes to the offensive line in a typical situation. There's often an eligible receiver, free runner, Lamar holding the ball while it wouldn't, it was a pressure and he moved and then he decided he wanted to make it into a run. And under those circumstances, it's usually just a pressure to the original guy who gave it up, or a third of a sack, as I would term it. But it's because it's the same score, just to be clear to folks out there. But that it was definitely not entirely the offensive line in this game. I'll just put it that way.
I looked. I looked. I took a so Jonas Schaefer of the Baltimore Banner and another user on Twitter both independently put out all 22 of all 7 of the Lamar sacks, and I looked at them not in depth. I didn't diagram them or anything, but one thing that really struck me was that when uh, the times that Lamar kind of sifted through the initial pass rush and kind of stepped up into open space, the Lions were able to bring multiple guys at him in that situation. And I guess one of them was usually the spy, who's 5 to 7 or so yards in front of him, and then another guy coming off of the side. And I don't think it's usual that defenses are able to get 2 guys on Lamar in that situation. And so very often I felt like Lamar broke through the initial wave and was looking at 2 guys, not just one.
Yeah, the spy was very effective. And I think what you're describing maybe was accentuated by the fact that the spy did not aggressively come downhill at Lamar. He kind of closed the hole so as to do what a good 2-gapping lineman with no opponent might do, is to maintain his options on leverage and which way he's going to go to match the quarterback. And that allowed some other pursuit to catch Lamar.
A defender in basketball closing out on a shooter who's also a threat to drive. You close out under control so that you don't leap and fly at him. You stay under control so you can go with the drive either way.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Sometimes if the guy's getting the ball, it's just a shooter, you play his right hand right on the money. But
you fly at him, right, if he can't dribble. But this is not the case.
All right. I
wanted to say one thing about Lamar's net yards per attempt.
Okay.
So is that about 6.8?
Well, I can calculate it right now. So it was 233 after the sacks divided by 34 because Henry had one of them. So 6.9, actually 6.85.
That figure would be 8th or 9th in the league this year, between Justin Herbert and Matthew Stafford. No, Caleb Williams, actually.
Boy, are we spoiled.
Yeah, right. So I mean, that's a top 10 performance.
Yeah, I guess from that perspective, we probably really shouldn't have a problem with it. It was 1.4 yards per play above the expectation for his opportunity set. So he had not only did he do this thing that's 8th or 9th best in the league on a league average basis, he did this thing under terrible conditions in terms of being pressured. So I thought that was impressive. He was 3 for 3 on contested throws in this game. And some of that is Lamar really being helped by his receivers. I thought Hopkins did a great job, obviously, on the sideline grab. That was one of them. I think Hopkins had Andrews had both of the other contested catches. And honestly, one of them, I think, was the really good throw to Lamar in the corner of the end zone. So it was at least 50 or 60% Lamar's great throw, and the rest was Andrews going to get the football well. And I think they would have called that contested, though I can't say for sure. And then he had another contested catch that I'm having trouble remembering.
The emergence of the statistical emergence of Andrews in this game and of Bateman in this game are, to me, the 2 positives, along with Lamar's performance when not sacked in this game. I think those are maybe the 2 or 3 positives that you could take away from this for the offense.
Yeah, definitely some positives there that are worth talking about. Let's talk about some other scheme and results, because how the skill positions really got into this game. But the running back snap division, for the first time, Hill outsnapped Henry in this game 29-28. Ali again with 0 snaps, 0 ponies, and a Mitchell inactive, which we've already harped about a little bit before. We're not going to bore you with again.
But I might bore people a little bit later with some more on that.
Henry carried, received, or was targeted. So really, is carried or was targeted on 13 of his 28 snaps, and Hill only on 4 of 29. And I believe all of those were his receiver. He caught 3 out of 4 balls, if I recall correctly, and did not run the ball. Anyway, you may have that. But I did want you, I know every week you do a column on Russell Street Report to talk about some of the receiving statistics. I wanted to let you kind of take the floor here and talk your way through those, and I'll ask some questions.
Okay. Well, so I do a receiver's box score for each game, and I sort that one just by yards per target. Tez Walker with his 1 target and 1 catch for 34 yards is obviously at the head of that list. You've got Mark Andrews with 15.2 yards per target and 2 touchdowns. Justice Hill, 3 catches on 4 targets, 11.3 yards per target, and Bateman with 9.0 yards per target and a touchdown. 4 players had explosive plays. Tez Walker obviously had his 34-yard catch. So an explosive is any reception for 20 yards or more. Mark Andrews had a 20. Justice Hill had a 20. Rashad Bateman had a 20. And 3 players had what I'm calling a quality start, which is a game of 3+ receptions while maintaining a 7 yards per target average or higher. And those were Mark Andrews, Justice Hill, and Rashad Bateman.
All right. The seasonal totals for this Flowers is over 10 yards per catch per target right now, which is nice. You have that. I don't want to step on your lead here. If you
well, absolutely, yeah. So there's a stat that I created and track, which is yards per target times success rate. So I'm calling that YPT, and Tez Walker leads the Ravens with 20, but DeAndre Hopkins has 12. Zay Flowers has 6. Mark Andrews is 5.88. And a couple of players are among the league leaders here. So on the entire season, DeAndre Hopkins is first in the whole league in yards per target. Tez Walker would be first if he qualified, but he doesn't have enough receptions. Zay is 21st in yards per target. Mark Andrews is 26th. That's
incredible. He had 7 targets. No, 4 targets for 7 yards coming into this game.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Zay is 8th in the league in receiving yard, and he's 7th in my AYTS stat, which is attempts times that efficiency stat I mentioned. That YTS, yards per target times success rate, Hopkins is 1st in the league, Zay Flowers is 22nd in the league, and Andrews is 35th. So we got 3 players in the top 35 in that, which is, it's impressive.
I think what I'm going to point to coming out of these receiving statistics is that all it really took was 1 great game from Andrews, and the tight end production is right back in line with where it's been the last 2 years, which I thought was completely unrepeatable, and particularly with Andrews apparently getting old really quickly,
right,
was something that was not going to be nearly as good. But after this game, Andrews' results alone jacked his passer rating being thrown to up to about 147 for the year.
Yeah.
So it was 158.3 in this game. It was a perfect score, with a couple touchdowns, no interceptions. I think he caught 6 out of 6 balls for 91. All of those things he did were absolutely met the standard for a perfect score. But the overage carries over and uplifts his 7 yards on 4 targets from the first 2 games to a degree, where the tight end statistics now look very much like they have the last couple of years.
Yeah. So I think the 2 things I would say about that are it's not very deep into the season, right? So statistics, season-long statistics are going to remain volatile, subject to inflation or deflation by one, great or poor game, probably for another few games. And tight ends, a 90-yard game goes a long way among tight end statistics because most tight ends don't produce like that.
Right. Yeah, and even in 2 consecutive years, so we're talking about a span of 34 games, they had 30 touchdowns and 1 interception in the last 2 years, which is just absolutely incredible. And it's 2-0 this year, which is not even up really to quite the standard that it's been. If you want to really try and micromanage that.
2 touchdowns without an interception, you guys suck.
Yeah. 3-0, then we're in play again.
Then we can talk.
Yeah. Okay. Other things from your observations from the game and your own statistical.
Well, I just wanted to mention Lamar's placement in league stats. So 3 games into the season, he's 1st in the league in yards per attempt, 1st in the league in total touchdowns, 1st in the league in touchdown percentage, and 1st in the league in passer rating. But passer rating excludes sacks. So last year he led the league in net yards per attempt, which is, with sacks subtracted out. And this year, and particularly after this game, he's no longer doing that. But when he does get the ball away, he's leading the league in passer rating.
Where is he in net yards per attempt?
5th.
Okay.
6th in success rate and 6th in my YTS.
Okay. Very 6th in success rate. I mean, there's nothing I can point to in those statistics and saying this is not a good Lamar season.
Right.
They played a couple of good defenses here now. The Lions are at least, I would think, in the middle of the pack. They certainly present a legitimate pass rush threat. The Browns appear to be one of the better defenses in the NFL, and the Bills may or may not be. They probably are not, but they're probably middle of the pack also. So they've certainly played a credible set of defenses at the very minimum, and I think I would say probably above average.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but it's weird because you take 5th in net yards per attempt and 6th in success rate, or 6th in my stat that combines the two. When Lamar has played full seasons, 2019, 2023, 2024, he's been the MVP, and don't talk to me about Josh Allen in 2024.
Yep.
So we think of, like, this is like top 6 is kind of a drop off for Lamar, which is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only say PFF ranked him down in a couple of ways in this game, and I think this, if they were here and talking about this, I think they'd agree that their system did not do a great job of the circumstances being reflected within that rating. So a lot of the game, Lamar Jackson really had to run around and try and make plays because that was the only option for the Ravens. And that meant maybe trying to break into level 2 and get some yardage on runs, which didn't always work out and ended up being a sack. The fumble on 4th down, it's not an ideal situation, but it is definitely a hold the ball situation. Wait to make the throw. You can argue about the play design. You can argue about a lot of other things. You can even say Henry was wide open on the left side on that play too. But it's not there really isn't anything to say about Lamar throwing. Actually, I don't think it was. No, it wasn't. There was a play recently where Ben Cleveland was wide open and he was an eligible receiver also. So if he had thought to raise his hand for the football, he might have gotten it. Or
was that in this game?
He was on the field for one play where he missed his block on a run play, I think at the 1 yard line.
Have you seen the footage of that rep? It looks ridiculous.
Yeah, terrible.
Just
utterly horrible.
Like a goon.
He looks like that guy from the 70s who used to try and dive into really shallow water. Do you remember him?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I thought you were talking about the agony of defeat guy from the skiing opening of
that sounds like it a little bit, but they had a guy in the 70s who he was in his 70s in the 1970s, and he would dive from heights of like 30 or 40 feet into 18 inches of water.
What?
And the way he would do it is he would
spread wide and splat.
Belly flop.
Yeah. You'd have to, right?
Yeah, you'd have to. You kill yourself otherwise. But he was a character, kind of like the guy who would catch the bullets in his teeth. I'm sure there's some older people who are listening to this pod who remember that guy, but obviously quite the con man. He was on Wide World of Sports a number of times. If you grew up with that, if you know, it's one of those. It's one of those things.
So if there's a criticism to be made of Lamar, it's that I'm kind of anticipating PFF here, right? So they're saying that some of the sacks are on him because he should have thrown the ball away, mm-hmm. right? Yep. Not because there was a receiver to hit, because when I look at those plays, there's not an open guy.
Right. I don't think the claim is that. They blame him for the fumble. They blame him for not getting rid of the football on sacks, and they blame him for the 2 turnover-worthy plays that he had. And I think that's fair. The turnover-worthy plays are the fair component, and he probably does deserve to be marked down for that. But at least was fortunate. You don't judge by the results alone, and the results that I'm giving you are already cleansed of those turnover-worthy plays.
Right.
So it's fair to say that PFF is at least probably grading him fairly on those cases. But it was marked as a horrible game for Lamar. I mean, not even just a bad game, a really bad game, like a 50-something score for the game.
I don't accept that. I do think, though, that Lamar has difficulty giving up on a play.
Yep. And I'm going to retort to that. Allow me to retort. Oh, you were done. Please. Allow me to retort. I know there's a lot of the audience will not be old enough to know that's from Pulp Fiction. But anyway, the thing I'd say about that is the decisions made by Lamar Jackson to extend plays almost always, or the balance of them, work out in the Ravens' favor tremendously.
Absolutely.
And that's where you just got to trust your superstar quarterback when he says, "Just playing ball, coach."
Yep. Yeah, so I agree, I think, wholeheartedly with that. So I would underscore, like, it's very difficult for him to give up on a play and throw the ball away. And that is part of a decision set, that he works through every game, and he usually produces outrageously with that, decision set. So when you have one game that, it backfires a little bit, like you kind of, on the one hand, you want to say, well, tip your cap to the defense, they got you this time. On the other hand, as a potential riposte to your retort, I would wonder if the caliber of defenses that the Ravens need to get past in the playoffs include these kind of defenses that maybe you do need to throw away the ball away sometimes against.
I hate things that come with that preface. Things that come with the preface, you can't win like that in the playoffs. Those teams, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I've already turned my ears off to it.
Okay.
I mean, it's the kind of thing that, first of all, I think a lot of the people who say it, and I'm not putting you in this class, Jim, because you study the game at a higher level than most. It's certainly true. But the people who say it often aren't in a position to judge scheme. And I actually just had this discussion on the defensive show about there's a certain arrogance that comes and should be ascribed to anyone who says I know better in terms of the Ravens scheme than the Ravens coaches do. And they should be running it this way instead. And you can apply that to me in terms of the Keaton Mitchell thing. But I do think the argument about Keaton Mitchell, that everybody knows he's getting the football if he's in the game, is exactly the reason why you need him in the game.
Yeah.
For example, I don't accept the argument as stated. Now, Harbaugh has since reframed that to be one of special teams value tips the scales. He's not sticking with everybody knows he's getting the ball anymore. So at least I feel somewhat vindicated is the wrong word, but somewhat like that's a better answer.
I agree with you about in general, most people who are here saying the Ravens can't, obviously the Ravens can't win that way in the playoffs. Look at the results. They prove that I'm right. But my only hesitation here is that I remember back to the playoff game against the Bills, and Josh Allen did not do anywhere near as much in terms of stretching to make plays as Lamar did. He played a very buttoned down, controlled, kind of conservative game and made no mistakes. And the mistakes that the Ravens made are what doomed them. So I wonder if a dose of conservative, mistake-free play, might not do Lamar good. Of course, he threw 4, less than 5 interceptions last year with 40 touchdowns, and none of the interceptions during the regular season were his fault. They were all receiver fault interceptions. So I don't really have a problem with Lamar's decision making. Yeah. It's just, just this, I guess, until they win it all, you're always in the back of your mind wondering, well, is there one extra thing that they could do? And since Lamar's the best player, you pick on the best player. Well, could he, throw the ball away more? Could he be a little more conservative in some situations? And I'm grasping at anything. There's not a lot of dependable logic on it. It's more emotional maybe than anything.
Yeah, it's certain athletes who transcend criticism in a lot of ways. Mahomes is there, and Lamar is not, and it's wholly because of the lack of a Super Bowl win.
Yeah.
In any other way, I mean, asking Lamar to generally handle your offense, there's nobody I'd rather hand the keys to,
absolutely,
including Mahomes. But in terms of his ability to win in January, that we haven't yet seen the ultimate prize. When that comes, I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of people out there saying, so what? That's only one. Mahomes has 3 or whatever. I'm sure there's going to be another bar raising, but it will be ridiculous. And a Lamar with a Super Bowl is or not.
I want to underline a point that you just made, because who does not get the criticism that Lamar Jackson does, despite playing far worse, is Joe Flacco.
Yeah, because he did win. He has that. But Joe Flacco, in his prime, when he was with the Ravens, he was an object of complete derision around the rest of the National Football League. It's really. I thought a lot of it was very unfair at the time. I thought that he's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, but he's certainly been a great quarterback in January, and that's been worth something more. And he's a good game manager, and blah blah blah. I thought there were a lot of positives of Joe. But he had some of the same problems that Lamar has had less of, frankly, in terms of the ability to win one-score games. So that had been a more serious Flacco problem than it was ever a Lamar problem. But it got projected onto Lamar. That's for sure.
Yep.
Okay, one or two more things I want to get out of here and get to the second show here. But 1.61 heavies per play. I bring that up pretty much every week, and it's a little bit lower than normal, which is still way higher than the average in the league for them to be playing an average of 61% of the way to 12 personnel on an
So I
average
know
snap.
that your audience is a dedicated, has a dedicated, is a dedicated band. But can we just underline when you say 1.6 heavies per game, you're talking about how many tight ends are in the game?
It's here's how it's calculated: total tight end snaps plus total fullback snaps plus total OL6 snaps divided by total snaps. Okay, so it's the average number of tight ends plus fullbacks plus OL6s you have on per play.
Yep.
And every one of those, you pretty much, the Ravens have one running back on every play. So every one of these heavies takes away an eligible receiver that is necessarily taken from the wide receiver group.
Yeah.
So that's the way to think of it, and that's why the Ravens playing heavy it's a conscious choice, of course, and they've done well with it in the past. But they've done a lot of it, even though they didn't have Isaiah Likely available.
Right.
And I'm thinking next week, I mean, we're going to see a much higher number than 161, 168, 155, those kind of numbers we've seen so far this year. Have
you been surprised how little Charlie Kolar we've seen in the absence of Likely? I have, as a
receiver specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, they got him involved in the offense. It was nice to see him, Bateman, and who was the third? You mentioned it earlier. Him, Bateman, and Andrews get back into the offense again in this game. But yeah, I want to see him more. I think they did try to throw him the ball, I believe, down the seam. And I think it was Kolar, not Bateman. But
I would have liked to have seen him in place of Zaire Payton Mitchell. I mean, he seems so obviously the second tight end, but maybe he's the only backup tight end, so you can't use him that way. Or I mean, how do you think the roster decision goes?
I think they're when they want to have two heavies, they really want to that they want to use on a run play. Then they want to have Kolar and Zaire Mitchell Payton both in the game. Zaire Mitchell Payton's actually, I think, been a little bit better as a pass blocker this year than he has a run blocker, although he hasn't been really great at either. And it's something where I think they trust him a little more with that. And of course, he had the Mitchell Payton had the big false start that cost him at the 1 yard line. All right, I got one more thing I need to mention, and that is the Ravens had in this game 23 set blocks, which is an unbelievable number for someone who counts these every week. I tell you, you almost never get a number that high. 11 chip blocks. So that's 34. What's a set block?
I know what a chip block is.
So a chip block, the receiver goes out after they make their block. A set block, they stay in and continue to make their block. So a set block is it's a sacrifice of an eligible receiver for the entire play. Yeah. Whereas a chip block, kind of think of it as maybe giving up half a receiver, maybe a little bit more than half, honestly, because there's a very limited set of routes they can run. But you can still have the option to be an outlet receiver, a check down for Lamar in those circumstances. But the 34 on 35 plays is 0.97 per play, and with the heavy preponderance of set blocks, that's a really extreme concession to your receiving core to make. And I'd say this was highly a function of the fact that the Lions rushed 4.8 per play. So it wasn't just getting after Lamar, it was kind of handcuffing the Ravens' opportunity to have receivers in the route that would have been a side benefit for the Lions of rushing numbers.
And yet Lamar passed for 10 yards per attempt when he could get the ball off. They scored 3 points per possession. He had a passer rating over 140 for the game. You talk about performing in a limited opportunity set.
Yep. I don't think the Lions would, if they knew exactly what the outcome was, even with the 7 sacks, if they knew the net yards and the 3 touchdowns and whatnot, I don't think the Lions would have taken that before the game, not knowing how their own offense was going to perform. I think they would have said, "No, we got to do better than that. We'll re-roll that attempt."
Yeah, maybe. Of course, 30, is a much lower point total than they'd been held.
No, they don't know the 30. All they know is Jackson's passing line. That's all they get to know.
Yeah. They'd be like, "All right, not that game plan. We need something else."
Yeah. All right. Jim, it's always great talking football with you. Stick around for part 2, folks, because we'll talk about the offensive line a fair amount and then the other skill position players. Jim will be back with us for that. But in the meantime, tell folks where they can find your work online and can they contact you if they want to talk football or tag you in.
Well, I'm always liking Ken's tweets. So you can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky with the same username. And there's a Substack out there that I write about football in season and about college basketball in season, and that's called Zip Drive and Dish. So Google Substack, Zip Drive and Dish, and you will find me.
Okay. Did I incorrectly report your site of writing earlier in this game? Because
you did, but not that. Tony L has very graciously invited me to continue writing my thing for RSR, but smaller, with a link to my Substack.
Okay.
So I took him up on that last week, and if I ever get this week's out, I'll do the same this week.
All right. All right. Outstanding. Thanks for coming on, Jim. All the folks out there, thanks for all your loyalty as listeners. If you want to do something nice for the show, I'd say write us a 5-star 50-word review if you don't mind. I know I ask that fairly often, but it always does help drive traffic to the show. If you want to comment on the articles online, I would point you to that on filmstudybaltimore.com. Jim, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.